What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another review here on Action Industries. My name is Ben Bateman, and today I'm talking to you guys about Season 2, Episode 1 of Ted Lasso. The episode is titled Goodbye, Earl, and I cannot freaking wait to talk to you guys about it. So, Ted Lasso Season 1, in the end, I think it's safe to say, was loved by all, and in my personal opinion, and I'm still kind of coming to terms with the fact that I feel this way, but I think Season 1 of Ted Lasso was my favorite season of television of all time. Now, this competes with some shows. Friday Night Lights was one of my favorite shows of all time. There are some similarities. I want to dive into that in just a second. I also love True Detective Season 1. There's a number of different shows, whether it's episodes of Breaking Bad, old episodes of Sopranos, favorites of mine, but television has expanded into an enterprise now where premium television represents 400 to 600 streaming shows or, premium, cable, whatever shows per year. It's impossible to get even close to watching all of the shows. So in the end, my opinion on Ted Lasso's place in the pantheon of great television, that's just something that I'm probably not the person that's most educated to speak on. What I can say is that in my experience, Ted Lasso has been my favorite show I've ever watched. I loved Season 1 from start to finish, and I wanted to talk briefly here before I get into this episode as to why I think Ted Lasso Season 1 was so special. If you're watching this, you might have had the same experience. You probably had the same one I had, which is that you heard people loosely joking about this show called Ted Lasso. An American, college-level football coach moves to coach a Premier League team in London. It's Jason Sudekis. It looks very hammy. Nothing about it seemed like a show that would blow my mind. Everything about it screamed fun. Maybe that's the best we're going to get. In the end, after watching the full first season, the show ends with very similar feelings that old episodes of Friday Night Lights would give me. Now, Friday Night Lights takes itself a bit more seriously overall. However, the essence of there being a sports story, the sort of underdog team trying to overcome an extremely likable coach, a lot of those elements are very, very similar. And I think in the end, one of the reasons Season 1 worked so well was because they just did so much in the way of positivity. And this is what you hear about Ted Lasso the most. The show really focuses on a positive message. Even the lowest moments, even the most upsetting moments are usually not the saddest or most upsetting. The idea of hope and good energy and good vibes, persevering is such a big part of the character Ted Lasso as well as the vibe of the show. So, that being said, with the season ending and the show getting nominated for like 20 Emmys and being up for all kinds of stuff, Season 2 just debuted. It was on Friday the 23rd. The first episode was made live. I personally thought we were going to be able to watch the entire Season 2 at once. I thought they were going to do a dump because I only got into Ted Lasso much, much later. I got into the show once it had already debuted. The whole first season was available. I think many people did. I don't think there was a lot of people that were watching the show live as it was airing. So Season 2 just debuted. The first episode, which it's a little longer than 30 minutes in terms of the actual episode time, comes back featuring most of the same standout actors and actresses. You obviously have Sudekis as Ted Lasso. You have Juno Temple in there as Keeley. You've got Hannah Waddingham in there as Rebecca Welton. You have returns of characters like Jamie Tart and Higgins and Roy Kent, Coach Beard. Wonderful performances. Almost every single person I just named was nominated for an Emmy. In fact, other than Jamie Tart, I think they all were. Nick Muhammad, who's fantastic. So a lot of different characters come back here. You've seen all these people before. A couple people that it seems like are getting elevated to slightly more featured roles. The biggest of which is Cristo Fernandez, who plays Danny Rojas. Big part of this episode, Goodbye, Earl, is based around Danny Rojas. So what did I think of the first episode of Season 2 of Ted Lasso? First question, does it compare favorably to the vibe and the feeling that Season 1, the whole entire season, gave me? The answer is yes. I think this was a great episode. Season 2, Episode 1 of many shows, I think, suffer from a similar feeling, which is that when you go in, you want it to pick up right where it left off. Because if you loved the previous season, in theory, you would have watched 2, 3, 5 more episodes of that season, had it just continued on. But that's not how story arcs work. So they have to start you over. They have to set some stuff up. They have to bring in new characters. It's one of the hallmarks of a Season 2 of television is that you will almost always be introduced to one or two new major characters in this first episode. You have a sports psychologist who shows up in this first episode, played by Sarah Niles. Her character is Dr. Sharon Fieldstone. She comes in, and there's a bit of a tension with her relationship to Ted Lasso, his coaching style, and her ability to have some sort of psychological advantage in the way that she works with players. Now, this is a spoiler episode, guys. I am absolutely 100% going to spoil everything that happens in the episode as I talk about it. But if you have watched it or you're curious to watch it, come back later if you want to still watch it. Whatever it is, I'm going to tell you about what happens in the show. The episode, of course, opens with a penalty kick being taken by the aforementioned Danny Rojas. He accidentally strikes and kills Earl, the dog. The dog has become the mascot of the team. The team has been basically only ending games in ties. Rojas can't get over the fact that he killed this dog, and they bring in a sports psychologist, as I mentioned, to talk to Danny and to sort of try to get him out of it because he's developed a case of the yips. Now, some of the stuff in this episode that stands out to me, and I think maybe some of the stuff that is the best in this first episode, is you start to see that the journey from 0 to 100 that we got in the first season of Ted Lasso, there are some cracks. Ted didn't do everything right. He doesn't know how to do everything. It's a wonderful show, and he's at odds with the sports psychologist just a little bit. You know, they don't totally get along. She seems a bit dismissive of him. She speaks a ton of languages. There's kind of a running gag with that. But ultimately, getting Danny out of the position that he's in is the goal of bringing in the sports psychologist. And Dr. Sharon Fieldstone does a great job with that. In the end, she's able to prove herself and, get Rojas out of the hole there. Now, at the same time, you have this wonderful response from Ted Lasso. This is, I think, the moment in the episode that felt the most like a season 1 standout, a highlight, if as it were. Some of the stuff that was the most effective, I think, in the first season. The famous darts scene is, I think, one of the best scenes in the whole show. Because there's this great thing Ted does as a character where you don't take him that seriously until he makes you take him seriously. And he delivers a monologue, or he has a scene where he reveals something about himself, and you realize that positive veneer, that extremely optimistic approach, that's just something Ted does. It's not who Ted is. That's a cartoon character, and the parts of him that you see that remind you of the heart of the show are really the standouts. And so there's a great moment where Trent Krim from The Independent asks Ted how he feels about the death of Earl the dog. And Ted just delivers this wonderful monologue about his relationship to a dog that attacked him as a kid. As he got older, he ended up taking care of that dog, and it's one of those things. They lay some music behind it. It's a great performance by Sudekis, and you tear up a little bit. And there's these certain moments when Ted says certain things in those monologues that I think really, to me, stand out and ultimately are, I think, the biggest proving ground as to why this show is the show that it is. The comedy is great, the casting is great, but it's when you have Ted lay in those moments and those performances that really stands out to me. So he gives this great speech. Danny's kind of in shambles. At the same time, you've got Hannah Waddingham, and she's dating this new guy because now it seems like everybody's relationship to one another internally with the team, whether it's Higgins to Keeley and Keeley to Rebecca and Ted, they're just all closer. They seem like much more like they're friends than trying to work their way out of a complicated web. And she's doing some dating, and she goes on a double date at one point with a guy she's seeing with Keeley and Roy. The date goes okay. Roy's kind of struggling because, moving on from football has been hard for him. And he gives some very honest advice to Rebecca by basically saying, don't settle for a guy who's settling. Settle for a guy who makes you feel like you've been struck by lightning. Somebody amazing. That's what you deserve. And you can see the journey that she's going through when it comes to re-entering the dating world. And so that's interesting. It sets up that we're going to probably see some romance with Hannah Waddingham's character throughout the rest of this season. It does make you wonder. They had teased at some sort of Ted-Rebecca romance in season 1. We had never really quite gotten there. There was a quick fake-out moment in, I think, the 6th or 7th episode of the first season, and it does make me wonder, is that a direction they're going to take us? This episode, of course, ends with Jamie Tart showing up on one of those dating shows, like Fuckboy Island or, Too Hot to Handle, one of those types of shows. He shows up, and Roy is watching it with his yoga ladies that he sees every week. And it's definitely funny. It's definitely funny to see him show up. He's exactly the guy that you would expect to be on one of those shows. And so that was definitely funny and a lot of fun. And it's good to see him back. Jamie Tart is definitely a character. Phil Dunster is the actor who was pretty effective in season 1. You'd like to see, maybe him mending his relationship to Lasso at some point. Probably that's a longer term play. So we'll see how that all ends up going. That's, I think, most of the big plot stuff that happens in the episode. No mention of Ted's family in this episode, other than the fact that he gets a cute text from his son, but his wife is not mentioned whatsoever. Overall, this episode of the show felt right on par with what we saw in season 1. I think there was a high level of expectation for me, just because, obviously, I love season 1 so much. I would say that season 2, episode 1 underperforms for me by maybe 10%, but I don't know that I was holding it to a realistic standard, and it sets me up for feeling like season 2 is going to be every bit as good. I think it was a pretty damn good episode. It does seem like Zorro is going to be a character that we see more of. He appears to be in the show more often. And overall, I think that this was just a strong outing. I think I'm happy to see it. It feels like they're going to mostly be able to recapture the vibe and the magic of season one. And I think for me and for all of you watching, probably that was the thing. That was the goal. That was what we wanted to see the most. Let me know in the comments, guys. Did you enjoy this? Do you think it holds up? Do you think this means we're going to get a great season 2? I'm curious to know. Season 1 was the most delightful surprise, a piece of content that I think I can remember watching, and like I don't even know ever. I truly don't even know how long it's been. And so I'm curious to know if you guys were impressed. What do you think of the new characters? Do you think the Doctor is a good new character? Do you like the Dutch guy on the team? Yeah, what do you think? Do you feel like some of the writing is predictable? I'm curious to know what you guys think. Otherwise, check back next week. I'm going to be doing weekly reviews of these every single week, talking about my thoughts on the new episodes of Ted Lasso. It is such a gift that we get to watch this show right now. Otherwise, guys, thank you for watching. Hit that like button, and of course, hit subscribe if you haven't already. We do movie reviews, trailer reactions, live streams on this channel all the time. All right, guys, enjoy your weekend, and I will see you very soon.